standard. So it sounds like the gold bullion standard, they created these very large bars that were impractical, and so only a very small number of large banks could have them, and the average person couldn't have any gold. And the gold exchange standard, they said nobody can have any gold, but the dollar is theoretically backed with and exchangeable to foreign central banks with gold at a certain rate. Is that basically the essence?
I'm not so sure, and I don't think it's necessary to forbid holding gold bullion or gold coins if you run a gold exchange standard. But most people will forego gold bullion, gold coin, because they think that the gold exchange is just as safe, and it's certainly more convenient. It's easier to transfer from one country to another than gold bullion or gold coins. So what amazes me is that people never questioned that it's not the same. It's because of this double counting feature. They are completely oblivious. They just close their eyes. They don't want to see that the same gold is double counted or triple counted or quadruple counted. And that's a very important distinction. Because as far as you are concerned, it works for you. But does it work for society? It doesn't follow. For society, it definitely won't work because of this double counting feature, which makes it ultimately liable to collapse. Because there is such a thing as day of reckoning. And on the day of reckoning, double counting will be crystal clear. Because like the game of musical chairs, the music stops, you want to sit down, and your chair is gone. Because of the double counting of chairs. As long as the music is on, you don't care about the number of chairs and the number of people, that they don't match. But as soon as the music stops, you might be out of luck. And as it happened, more people are out of luck than people are in luck who find the chair. So I think that's the crux of the matter. The failure of the educational system to educate young people that this is bad, double counting is bad, gold exchange standard is bad. And why? Because of double counting. It is not a permanent monetary arrangement. It may work for a period of time, but then people get emboldened and say, oh, wonderful, we have eliminated gold. Gold is no longer needed. So we can play musical chair games all we want. No bad thing can come to us from that. It's not true. It can and it does. I don't know if this answers your question.
Of course.
Any more, Ben?
Well, now let me make a statement just to round off the line of thought here. The list is much longer than these three, because the real crux of the matter came not in 1944, but in 1971. And I would even describe it as all hell broke loose. I'm not asking you to write it down, but all hell broke loose on August the 15th, 1971. And that was the day when President Nixon defaulted on the international gold obligations of the United States. And to see that all hell broke loose, you don't have to do anything else than look up any chart. Could be a commodity price chart, could be a real estate price chart, could be a stock price chart, or take the more exotic derivatives of those. All price charts show that something explosive took place. Oh, I didn't mention the interest rate chart, which is the reverse of the bond price chart. You know, this is the, and there it's not an explosion, but it's an implosion. The bond price, as you know, move opposite to the rate of interest. So if the rate of interest explodes, the value of the bond implodes. That's a mathematical relation, not a statistical, it's a mathematical relationship. It always happens, no exception. So if you take a look at these charts, you will see that something very drastic happened. And of course we know what happened. The whole world, en bloc, the French word en bloc, all together left the gold standard in any diluted form. So it was a clear break. Up until that point, you could argue that there is vestiges of the gold standard, some form or another. But after August 15, 1971, this was no longer true. An explosion took place. All the markets showed it, yet economists, the profession of economists, just pretended that it didn't happen. It didn't happen. And no serious study has been given analyzing the connection between the two. This price explosion and the cutting off of the cutting the connection between money and gold by stroke of the pen. It's amazing. It's amazing that not. Well, of course, if somebody like myself would have liked to write a book on this, nobody would prevent me from doing it, but I would have no publisher, no access to research money. All the Federal Reserve banks of the United States, and 12 of them have research departments dishing out money with two hands, you know, to people. If you pretend to do research in economics, you just have to say yes, and then you get the money and the prestige which goes with it. But if I try to write a book on this, the two events happen at the same time, and is there a connection between? Forget it. Well, I don't want to take your time away from questions because we have a very limited period here. We have to go to lunch at 12 because at 1 we have to come back for Keith's presentation. I'm happy to say that I will be here. Yesterday I said I have other, but no, I will be here. And looking forward to it too. So,
questions? Any more? Rudy?
Well, I just want to make a comment, really. I think this is very nicely put. Under the gold coin standard, you count the coins once. Then you go down and you double count. Then you don't go down again and you count every different, 4 times count. And in 1971, you stop counting. So you start off with musical chairs, and there are fewer chairs and fewer chairs. 1971, people are still dancing, the music's playing, but there are no chairs.
Excuse me, Professor, can you just repeat that last bit you said about the bonds? And there's no, it always follows suit. I just missed a bit before then.
Your comment about bonds and interest rates.
Well, you answer.
I mean, Professor is just saying that there's a strict relationship between the interest rate and the bond price. In fact, the interest rate is defined from the bond price, the bond spread. And if the bond price collapses, by definition, that means that the interest rate is shooting up. And that's what happened during the 70s.
And the other way around, both ways.
Yeah.
Think of it this way. A bond is an income because it has coupons and you redeem the coupons as they mature. Now, if the interest rate changes, the actual income in terms of units of money does not change. But any new bond you buy, it will give you a different income. The same capital sum gives you one income at one rate, at a certain rate of interest, and a different income at a different rate of interest. And in fact, it's more precise than that, because if you increase the rate of interest, then the rate of income will be lower. Now, you have to argue this out. I don't think we have time for that. But that's the crux of the matter, that when interest rate changes, the actual amount you collect as income from the coupons does not change. It's the same for the old bonds. But if you now go to a newly issued bond, then it will be different, and it will be the opposite, because nobody would give you the same income if the interest rate has changed. And well, you just have to think it over, and it's not as difficult as it looks. And I might also add that this is not challenged. This is a universally accepted fact, which all brokers, investment advisors, economists accept. This is quite uncontroversial. Very few things are in monetary science and economics, but this one is completely uncontroversial. So,
Yep.
I understand from what I've read that in 1971 the Americans had been printing more money than they had gold to support it, which is what happens with the system. And they'd gone over to France and had printed some more money to buy some French companies, and as a punishment, the French government said, right, we want to be paid now in gold, not in US dollars, and as a consequence, the Americans said, no, you're not taking all of our physical gold back to France, we're breaking this link. Now, my question doesn't relate to that so much as what happened after 1971 with the governments of the world? Have they been still hoarding their gold? Have they been buying gold? It would tell you whether they believe in gold, because if they don't believe in gold, and they move from a gold standard, you would expect them just to sell the whole lot and say gold doesn't mean anything anymore. Is Fort Knox still full, or is it empty?
So far as the public record is concerned, the picture is fuzzy, because a lot of governments just don't report their gold.
Yeah, but that's public record. You would know better.
You would know better than public record.
Well, yeah, but you know, opinion and facts are two different things. So we don't know really what happened. But what we do know is that the world was fooled. The whole world was fooled by one man, another bad guy. Name is Milton Friedman, because he was the one who put the idea into the head of Nixon, that you could pretend that the US dollar is an ultimate extinguisher of debt, and people will accept that. And that explains it, that you don't need gold anymore. Gold is passé. It's a bad gold standard. Louis made the correction yesterday that Keynes didn't say that gold is a barbarous relic. He said the gold standard was. Well, it's a nuance of a difference, not terribly important. But gold finished, no longer needed. We have a synthetic substitute, much better, easier to carry, easier to wire around the world. The US dollar does it, and does it much better, you know. And that was spread. All the universities in the world started changing the textbooks. And the new generation of professors started to preach the new gospel, that the US dollar is better than gold. Up to that point, the slogan was the US dollar is as good as gold, but now, after 1971, this is how logic can be perverted. After 1971, the dollar is better than gold. And the world swallowed it. How's the saying? Hook, line, and snooker. Swallowed it. You know? Nobody said, oh, wait a minute, how is that? Let's just go through the reasoning once more. There may be some little snag then. Nobody said that. It was just accepted.
There's 160,000 tons of gold, you said. That it doesn't increase or doesn't change very much from year to year. So what's happened since 1971? Has there been a lot of movement of this gold from one country to the next? Why I ask the question is that it would give me confidence of whether the people in power actually want gold as a backstop, or whether they believe their conviction that they can just have this money system.
Well, you want my opinion?
Yes.
I think there's a saying somewhere to the effect that people love to be fooled, something to that. These are not the exact words, but the content is that people enjoy to be fooled just as much as they enjoy to fool others. There's just as much pleasure in being fooled as in fooling some other people. It's a perversion, but that's the way it is. And even today, people believe that. It doesn't matter how much value, purchasing power the dollar loses year in, year out. It doesn't matter. People don't look at that fact. They just say that this has stamps, it has the picture of George Washington and Abraham Lincoln and other guys, and it can never happen here. Now, remember, this is what they say in America. In Europe, it's not as simple, because it did happen in Europe. It happened in France at the end of the French Revolution. It happened in Germany after World War I, and again in lots and lots of other countries after World War II, and the people in these countries are not so easily fooled as the Americans. But all I can say is that as far as America is concerned, people can be fooled and they enjoy being fooled.
Professor, you've talked about empowering the masses by opening the mints and allowing the public to use gold and silver coins. You've also talked about the power of the establishment in thwarting a potential return to a viable gold standard. And you've also mentioned the draconian powers employed by authorities and countries in confiscating people's gold. So do you think that that is going to happen again in Western democracies?
Well, I don't practice clairvoyance. I don't know what will happen in the future. It is possible. On the other hand, the argument is that, how is the saying, fool me once, the shame is on you. Fool me twice, the shame is on me.
Yeah.
Who knows? I don't know. I can't answer that. Perhaps you can.
No, I can't.
I have one thought from an American perspective. I was saying this last night at the beer table. There's a very, very high correlation in the U.S. between gun ownership and gold ownership. And the saying is, you can have it out of my cold, dead hands. So I think if they tried it, there would be a lot of, shall we say, civil unrest. It doesn't mean they wouldn't try it, but...
It would be a bit strange, because if they sort of said, we want your gold, that's implying that they put value to it for some reason. And if the past 50 years has been trying to say that gold has no role in the monetary system, well then why do you want my gold? But that's a bit of a silly argument.
But people went along with it in 1933, and it's mentioned the powers employed were quite draconian in getting people to accept it.
Yeah, I mean, who knows what... I think it would just be exceptionally hard to do it today. Because you're admitting something to gold. You're admitting something about gold that is not supposed to be admitted. That doesn't prevent people from stealing it, though. But
here is an interesting point, that before 1933 people were supremely confident that the government cannot confiscate gold because gold is out in circulation, and the government would have to have 10 times as many policemen to send simultaneously in every home and pick the pockets of every citizen. And they just, it's not possible to do, they said. And yet it was, because Roosevelt did it. So now today you might say, the government just this year sold so many gold eagles, and in other countries like Canada, Canadian maple leaf coins, and so on and so forth. So that's your guarantee that it can't happen. Yet we have no precedent that it did. But as I say, people have a thinking which is rather backward, and I don't know. And I don't think really it is productive to speculate and try to second guess what the government may or may not do. You just have to make up your mind that you are not going to comply with the confiscation order. You rather dig a hole in your basement and finish it with concrete so nobody will see it. And tell only a very limited number of people, perhaps one son and somebody else, to be sure that if you die, then you don't take the secret with you in the grave. But, I mean, we are not here to discuss this.
Rudy had a comment.
It's not really true that all the Americans gave up their gold under Roosevelt. Lots of them did, but lots of gold went offshore. I would say the smart money, a lot of it went to Canada and to Europe. And to this day, you can read about American coins coming back. You're buying coins from Europe. So don't think that everybody was stupid enough even back then or trusting enough to give away their gold. And today, much, much different world. People then trust the government a lot more than they do today, obviously. So just 2 cents worth.
So when you talk about the gold standard and you talked about silver as money, is it quite possible for a bimetallic standard to exist, or will it always be a gold standard?
Is it possible? No. Is it possible for a bimetallic standard to exist, or will it be gold only? You have to be careful what you mean by bimetallism here. I mean, if you mean a fixed ratio between the two, then that will fail. Whereas if you say...
Also, the word for the gold and silver standard existing side by side at a variable ratio is double standard, as opposed to the bimetallic standard, where there's a rigid relationship between the gold price and the silver price.
That would fail.
That would fail. And we have historic proof for that. But the other standard, double standard, where both gold coins and silver coins exist and they are in circulation at a variable exchange rate, is not just viable, but probably it's necessary, because the amount of silver in circulation was enormous before 1871, when Germany demonetized silver, and 2 years later the United States also demonetized silver. They wiped out 80% of the liquid wealth, the value of the liquid wealth represented by the silver coins in circulation. How do we know that it was 80%? Because this is the amount of movement in the bimetal, in the gold-silver ratio. It started from 15.5 and went way up to 80 or 85, I forget which, and this corresponded to an 80% reduction in the value, in the market value of silver. Now that's bad enough effects, and I think it's unprecedented. You don't find, you may, such as foodstuffs after bumper crop, but let's forget about other examples. But it's not just that wealth was wiped out in this proportion, 80% disappeared, but it was liquid wealth, which is far more important, because liquid wealth, importance of liquid wealth is that you don't have to worry about selling it. You have any other form of wealth, say Picasso's or old master paintings, they represent very high concentrated wealth. But if you want to use it for other purposes, you have to sell the darling old master or the darling Picasso or whatever you have. And that's a big problem, because you may be lucky to get 50% of the quoted, of the catalog value of these, because they're highly unliquid. But silver was just as liquid as gold was before 1871, and the circulating silver coins represented that much liquid wealth, and 80% was wiped out. Now you wonder why it was deflationary after World War One was over. They had a gold. Roosevelt re-established the gold standard. Britain tried to re-establish. You wonder why it was deflationary? Well, 80% of something very, very liquid, wealth, was wiped out. So all the demand, the monetary demand, was concentrated on gold, which previously was distributed between gold and silver. And 80% of the silver was wiped out, just like that. And all the monetary demand came down on gold. So is there any wonder that there was deflation when 80%? And I ask you, how many books have you seen where this question is discussed and analyzed in a serious way? None. You are talking about prehistoric, Stone Age stuff. But it was only I was already alive when the British gold standard, re-established in 1925, collapsed in 1931. No, I was born a year later, sorry. Okay, now, we have 3 more minutes.
3 more minutes, yes.
Two more questions.
Yes. Rudy?
I just think it's incredible that the gold standard per se survived the 80% reduction in purchasing power when silver was wiped out, until the real bills were also wiped out. Not only was the circulating medium reduced, but that which could replace it in a way and funding things was also gone. So now it's not just 80% wiped out, but 98% or God knows how much.
You know, it's absolutely amazing that Keynes and Friedman and others succeeded convincing the world that deflation is equal to gold standard. And just the opposite is the case. It was the distortion of gold standard. It was these imposter gold standards and all kinds of other government measures limiting the real gold standard, which is a gold coin standard plus real bill circulation, which were responsible for bringing about deflation, depression, unemployment, wholesale collapse of valuable firms which satisfied real human demand, and they did it in a very good way. One more question.
Any more questions?
Well, if not, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Very much.
Sorry to cut it short like that, but we are under time pressure
Yeah.
today.